The river's dark waters beckoned to Clara Thompson as she stood on the bank, her tear-stained face reflecting the pale moonlight of a Montana summer night in 1878. The weight of her grief pressed down on her chest like an anvil, making each breath more painful than the last. Clara's fingers trembled as she untied the ribbon of her bonnet, letting her auburn hair cascade down her shoulders. The white cotton dress she wore, her mother's dress, clung to her slender frame as she took her first step into the frigid waters of the Missouri River. Each step forward numbed her body, but did nothing to dull the ache in her heart. The letter that had arrived that morning, informing her of her parents' death in a stagecoach accident, lay discarded on the riverbank behind her. At 22, Clara was now completely alone in the world. Her father's ranch would likely be seized by the bank to cover his debts. The home she had known her entire life would soon belong to strangers. As the water reached her waist, she closed her eyes, welcoming the cold embrace that promised an end to her suffering. Xavier Young had spent 14 hours in the saddle that day, tracking a herd of wild horses through the Montana Territory. At 30 years old, he had made a name for himself as one of the best horse wranglers this side of the Mississippi. His weathered face and calloused hands told the story of a man who had lived a hard but honest life under the vast western sky. He had made camp along the river, tending to his loyal quarter horse, Rusty, before settling down with a tin cup of coffee. The moon was bright enough that he hadn't bothered with a fire, preferring the peaceful darkness of the Montana night. That's when he saw her, a ghostly figure wading into the river, moving with deliberate slowness toward the deep current. "Hey!" Xavier called out, dropping his coffee and scrambling to his feet. "Stop!" The woman didn't turn. Either she hadn't heard him or she was choosing to ignore his calls. Xavier kicked off his boots and shed his leather vest, diving into the river just as the woman's head disappeared beneath the surface. The current was stronger than he'd anticipated, pushing against him as he swam toward the spot where she had vanished. Taking a deep breath, Xavier plunged beneath the surface, his hands searching blindly in the murky water. His lungs burned for air, but he refused to resurface until his fingers brushed against fabric. Gripping the material tightly, he pulled the woman toward him and kicked his way back to the surface. Gasping for air, Xavier hooked one arm around the woman's chest, using his free arm to fight against the current as he dragged her toward the shore. Her body was limp against his, her head lolling against his shoulder. Fear gripped him as he wondered if he was too late. "Come on," he muttered through clenched teeth, his boots sinking into the muddy riverbank as he hauled her onto dry land. He laid her on her back, pressing his ear to her chest. A faint heartbeat, but she wasn't breathing. Xavier tilted her head back and pushed on her chest, forcing the water from her lungs. After several tense moments, the woman convulsed, water spewing from her mouth as she coughed violently. Relief washed over him as color slowly returned to her pale cheeks. "There you go," he said softly, helping her roll onto her side. "Just breathe." Clara's lungs burned as she gasped for air, each breath sending spasms of pain through her chest. Through the haze of consciousness, she became aware of strong hands supporting her shoulders, a deep voice murmuring reassurances. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Death should have been peaceful, not this painful struggle for breath. When her coughing subsided, Clara pushed herself up, her soaked dress clinging uncomfortably to her skin. Her eyes focused on the man kneeling beside her, a stranger with dark hair and concerned eyes. Shame and anger surged through her veins. "Why did you do that?" she demanded, her voice raspy from the river water. "Why couldn't you just let me be?" Xavier sat back on his heels, studying the woman before him. Despite her bedraggled appearance, he could see she was beautiful, with delicate features and fiery auburn hair that curled around her face. But it was the pain in her eyes that struck him, a profound grief that seemed to hollow her out from within. "I'm not in the habit of watching folks drown themselves," he replied calmly. "Especially not young women with their whole lives ahead of them." Clara laughed bitterly, wrapping her arms around herself as she began to shiver. "You know nothing about my life." "You're right," Xavier conceded, standing up and removing his damp shirt. He handed it to her. "But I know about death, and whatever you're running from, this isn't the answer." Clara stared at the offered shirt, pride warring with the need for warmth. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, draping it around her shoulders. The fabric smelled of leather, horses, and pine earthy scents that somehow grounded her to the present moment. "My parents died," she said quietly, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "I got the letter this morning. Stagecoach accident near Denver." Xavier's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Thompson, Clara Thompson." "Xavier Young," he replied, extending his hand to help her up. "My camp's just over there. You need to get warm before you catch your death." Clara hesitated before taking his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. Her legs trembled beneath her, weak from her ordeal in the river. Without warning, her knees buckled, and she would have fallen if Xavier hadn't caught her, scooping her into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. "I can walk," Clara protested, though she made no move to extricate herself from his grasp. "Sure you can," Xavier replied with a hint of amusement. "But humor me. It's been a long day, and I'd rather not dive back into that river if you collapse halfway to camp." At his camp, Xavier set Clara down on a bedroll near the small fire he quickly kindled. He rummaged through his saddlebags, producing a spare shirt and trousers. "They'll be too big," he said apologetically, "but they're dry. You can change behind that stand of trees. I'll keep my back turned." Clara clutched the dry clothes to her chest, a lump forming in her throat at this unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. When she returned to the fire, dressed in Xavier's clothes that indeed hung loosely on her frame, she found him brewing a fresh pot of coffee. He glanced up at her approach, a small smile touching his lips. "Better?" he asked, pouring a cup of the steaming liquid and offering it to her. Clara nodded, accepting the coffee gratefully. The warmth seeped into her cold hands, reminding her that she was, in fact, still alive. Part of her resented this fact, but another part apart she had thought dead until this moment felt a flicker of something almost like relief. "Where are you from, Miss Thompson?" Xavier asked, settling down across from her. "Clearwater Ranch," she replied. "About 10 miles east of here. My father," her voice caught. "My father built it with his own hands when he married my mother." Xavier nodded thoughtfully. "I know of it. Good land. Good horses, too, from what I've heard." "It won't be ours much longer," Clara said bitterly. "Father had debts. Without him, the bank will take everything." Xavier studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "You have no siblings, no other family to help." Clara shook her head. "I'm alone now." Completely alone. The reality of those words hit her anew, bringing fresh tears to her eyes. She blinked them back furiously, unwilling to show more weakness before this stranger. "You're not alone tonight," Xavier said simply. Clara looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. His face was weather-beaten but handsome, with a strong jaw and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. His dark hair fell in damp curls across his forehead, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his cheeks. He was clearly a man accustomed to life outdoors, to hard work and solitude. Yet there was a gentleness about him that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. In her experience, men rarely offered assistance without expecting something in return. Xavier shrugged, poking at the fire with a stick. "My ma raised me to believe that we're put on this earth to help each other through the hard times. And from the looks of it, Miss Thompson, you're going through about as hard a time as they come." They sat in silence for a while, the crackling of the fire and the distant hooting of an owl the only sounds breaking the night's stillness. Clara's eyelids grew heavy, the emotional and physical exhaustion of the day finally catching up with her. "You should rest," Xavier said, noticing her drooping shoulders. "Take my bedroll. I'll keep watch." Too tired to argue, Clara lay down, pulling the woolen blanket up to her chin. Despite her grief, despite the uncertainty that awaited her come morning, she felt strangely safe in the presence of this quiet cowboy who had pulled her from the river and treated her with nothing but kindness. "Mr. Young," she murmured, already half asleep. "Yes, Miss Thompson. Thank you for not letting me die tonight." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Xavier watched as Clara's breathing deepened into sleep, her face relaxing, momentarily freed from the burden of her sorrow. "You're welcome," he whispered, though she could no longer hear him. The first light of dawn found Xavier making breakfast over a fresh fire. He had slept little, keeping one eye on Clara and the other on their surroundings. The Montana wilderness was beautiful but dangerous, home to bears, wolves, and occasionally hostile bands of natives still resistant to the encroachment of white settlers. Clara stirred, momentarily disoriented by her surroundings before the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up, pushing her tangled hair away from her face. "Morning," Xavier greeted her, offering a tin plate of beans and salt pork. "It's not much, but it's hot." Clara accepted the plate, suddenly aware of her hunger. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten. "Thank you," she said, taking a small bite. The food was simple but satisfying. "I've been thinking," Xavier said after a moment. "About your ranch." Clara stiffened. "What about it? I'm heading that way myself. I can escort you home, make sure you arrive safely." "And then what?" Clara asked, setting down her plate. "I told you I'll lose the ranch. I have nowhere to go, no way to support myself." The despair that had driven her to the river the night before threatened to overwhelm her again. Xavier took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I might have a proposition for you, Miss Thompson. One that could save your ranch." Clara's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What kind of proposition?" "A business arrangement," Xavier clarified quickly, recognizing the wariness in her expression. "I've been looking to settle down, establish my own breeding operation. I've got some money saved and I know horses. If your ranch is as good as I've heard, it would be perfect." "You want to buy my ranch?" Clara asked incredulously. Xavier shook his head. "Not exactly. I'm proposing a partnership. My funds and expertise combined with your land. We could keep the bank at bay and build something worthwhile." Clara stared at him, searching for the catch. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Xavier met her gaze steadily. "I know enough. I know you're a woman who loves her home so much that losing it drove you to desperation. I know you're strong enough to survive what would have killed many others. That's the kind of partner I'd be proud to have." Clara looked away, overwhelmed by his words and the unexpected possibility they presented. "It's not that simple. The bank will want immediate payment. And even if we could manage that, there's still the matter of," she broke off, flushing slightly. "The matter of propriety," Xavier finished for her. "A man and woman living and working together without being married." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Clara was beginning to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "I understand that would be a concern." "I assure you my intentions are honorable." Clara almost laughed at the formality of his words. "Mr. Young, you pulled me from a river last night. I think we're past the point of formal assurances." A smile tugged at the corner of Xavier's mouth. "Fair enough, Miss Thompson." They finished their breakfast in contemplative silence, each weighing the implications of Xavier's proposal. As Clara helped him pack up camp, she found herself studying him when he wasn't looking. There was something reassuring about his methodical movements, the careful way he treated his horse, the respect he showed for the land around them. "We should reach your ranch by midday," Xavier said as he helped Clara onto Rusty's back. He swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back as he reached around her for the reins. "That'll give us time to assess the situation with the bank." Clara nodded, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her stomach at his proximity. "The banker, Mr. Rowlands, is a reasonable man. He respected my father. Perhaps he'll be willing to work with us." The ride to Clearwater Ranch was filled with stories exchanged between them, Xavier telling Clara about his years as a ranch hand and horse wrangler across the territories. Clara sharing memories of growing up on the ranch, learning to ride before she could walk, helping her father with the horses while her mother tended to the house and garden. "Your father sounds like a good man," Xavier remarked as they crossed a shallow stream. "He was," Clara said softly. "Stubborn as a mule and twice as proud, but kind, always kind." She swallowed hard. "He would have liked you, I think." "I'll take that as high praise," Xavier replied, his voice warm near her ear. As they crested the final hill, Clearwater Ranch came into view below them. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, stables. a smokehouse, and bunkhouses for the ranch hands, though Clara had explained that they had been forced to let most of the workers go in recent months as finances grew tight. A small herd of horses grazed in the nearest pasture, their coats gleaming in the midday sun. Even from a distance, Xavier could see they were fine animals, confirming what he had heard about the Thompson breeding program. "Home," Clara whispered, and Xavier felt her back straighten against his chest, as if the very sight of the ranch infused her with new strength. They were met at the gate by an elderly man with a shock of white hair and a weathered face. He rushed toward them, relief evident in his rheumy eyes. "Miss Clara, thank the Lord," he exclaimed, reaching up to help her down from the horse. "When you didn't come back last night, I feared the worst. After that terrible news about your parents, I'm all right, Joseph," Clara assured him, clasping the old man's hands in hers. "This is Mr. Xavier Young. He helped me when I needed it." Joseph eyed Xavier warily as he dismounted. "That's so. Well, any friend of Miss Clara's is welcome here, I suppose. Joseph has been with us since I was a baby," Clara explained to Xavier. "He's the only hand we kept on when times got hard." Joseph's expression darkened. "Speaking of hard times, that banker Rollins was here this morning, sniffing around, says he'll be back tomorrow to discuss the disposition of the property." "Vulture didn't even have the decency to wait until you'd properly mourned." Clara's face paled, but she set her jaw determinedly. "Then we have until tomorrow to come up with a plan." Joseph looked between Clara and Xavier, curiosity evident in his weathered face. "We." Clara hesitated, glancing at Xavier. They had discussed his proposal during the ride, but she had made no firm commitment. Now, faced with the imminent threat to her home, she found herself considering his offer more seriously. "Mr. Young has proposed a business partnership," she explained carefully. "His funds and expertise with horses combined with our land and breeding stock." Joseph's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Is that right? And what does Mr. Young get out of this arrangement?" Xavier stepped forward, meeting the old man's suspicious gaze directly. "A chance to build something lasting, sir. I've spent years working other men's land, training other men's horses. Miss Thompson's ranch represents an opportunity I'd be a fool to pass up." Joseph harumphed, not entirely convinced. "And what of propriety? A young, unmarried woman in business with a strange man. The gossips in town will have a field day." "Joseph," Clara admonished, though she knew his concerns were valid. Xavier cleared his throat. "That's something Miss Thompson and I need to discuss further. For now, the priority is saving the ranch from foreclosure." Joseph gave Xavier one final appraising look before nodding curtly. "Well then, I suppose you'd best come inside and get settled. There's stew on the stove, and Miss Clara looks like she could use a proper meal." As Joseph led them toward the house, Clara fell into step beside Xavier. "He's protective," she explained in a low voice. "He and my father were like brothers." "As he should be," Xavier replied. "He cares about you and your well-being. I respect that." Inside, the ranch house was modest but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and simple decorations. Photographs of Clara's parents hung on the walls, their faces smiling down at them. Clara paused before one, her fingers reaching out to touch the frame. "They look happy," Xavier observed quietly. "They were," Clara replied, her voice thick with emotion. 25 years married and still devoted to each other." She turned to Xavier, vulnerability clear in her eyes. "I always hope to find a love like theirs someday." Xavier held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. "That's a worthy aspiration," he said finally. After a hearty meal, during which Joseph peppered Xavier with questions about his background and experience with horses, they moved to the study to discuss the financial situation. Clara retrieved her father's ledgers from the desk, spreading them out on the table. "It's worse than I thought," she admitted after reviewing the figures. "The last 2 years were hard. Drought affected the grazing, and several valuable breeding mares died from a fever that swept through the territory." Xavier examined the ledgers carefully. "How much does the bank need to forestall foreclosure?" Clara named a sum that made Joseph whistle low between his teeth. "That's a hefty amount, even for a man of means." Xavier nodded thoughtfully. "It's most of what I've saved, but I can manage it." He looked up at Clara. If we're to do this, though, we need to be clear about terms. Equal partnership, equal say in how the ranch is run. Clara studied him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Finding none, she extended her hand. Equal partners. Xavier took her hand, his grip firm and warm. Partners. As the afternoon progressed into evening, they walked the property together, Xavier assessing the land and livestock with a practiced eye. Clara found herself impressed by his knowledge and the respectful way he handled the horses, taking time to approach each one and gain their trust. "You have a way with them," she observed as he calmed a skittish yearling with nothing more than soft words and gentle hands. Xavier smiled, stroking the young horse's neck. "They're honest creatures. They respond to honesty in return." "And people?" Clara asked, watching him closely. "Do you find them as honest as horses?" Xavier chuckled, stepping away from the yearling. "Not often. But occasionally, you meet someone whose heart is as transparent as these mountain streams." His eyes met hers, and Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the late afternoon sun. That evening, after Joseph had retired to his quarters and Xavier had been settled in one of the spare rooms, Clara found herself standing on the porch, gazing up at the star-filled sky. The events of the past 2 days swirled in her mind: the devastating news of her parents' death, her desperate plunge into the river, Xavier's rescue, and now this unexpected partnership that offered a chance to save her beloved home. The sound of the door opening behind her broke into her thoughts. Xavier stepped out onto the porch, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might like some company," he said, offering her one of the cups. Clara accepted it with a grateful smile. "Thank you." They stood in companionable silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching the moonlight spill across the ranch's rolling pastures. "I keep thinking about what Joseph said," Clara said finally. "About propriety." Xavier nodded slowly. "It's a valid concern. The success of a ranch depends not just on good stock and good land, but on relationships with neighbors, merchants in town, potential buyers. And a woman in business with a man not her husband or relative would raise eyebrows," Clara continued, "could affect those relationships." "It could," Xavier agreed. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "There's another solution, of course." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "Is there?" Xavier set his coffee cup on the porch railing, taking a deep breath. "I know this is sudden, we barely know each other. But I hope we've seen enough of each other's character to recognize something worth building on." Clara's pulse quickened as Xavier took her free hand in his. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Young?" "I'm suggesting marriage, Miss Thompson," he said plainly. "A partnership in every sense. We could save your ranch, build a future together. I'm not proposing love, not yet, but respect, honesty, and a shared purpose." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Marriage, but we've only just met." "I know," Xavier said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "It's not the romantic proposal you deserve, but I believe we could be good together, Clara. The way you care for this land, the strength you've shown even in your darkest moment, those are qualities I admire deeply." Clara looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. It was madness to consider marrying a man she had known for barely a day. And yet, there was something about Xavier Young that inspired trust. The gentle way he had held her after pulling her from the river, the respect he showed for her home and her grief, the honesty in his eyes when he spoke of their potential partnership. "I can't offer you love," she said quietly. "Not now. My heart is too full of grief." "I'm not asking for love," Xavier replied, his voice gentle. "Only for a chance to build something that might, with time, grow into more." Clara looked up at him, studying the face of the man who was offering to tie his future to hers. In the moonlight, his features seemed both strong and vulnerable, his eyes reflecting the same mixture of hope and uncertainty she felt in her own heart. "Yes," she said finally, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I will marry you, Xavier Young." Relief and something that looked almost like joy washed over Xavier's face. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her knuckles. "I promise to be a good husband to you, Clara, to honor and respect you, to work beside you to make this ranch thrive." "And I promise to be a good wife," Clara replied, feeling strangely calm now that the decision had been made. To honor and respect you, to build this partnership into something we can both be proud of. The next morning, they rode into town together to meet with Mr. Rowlands at the bank. The banker, a portly man with spectacles perched on his nose, was surprised by their proposal but couldn't hide his relief at the prospect of the loan being paid in full. "This is most unusual," he commented, peering at Xavier over his glasses. "You're willing to invest your savings in the Thompson Ranch, based on such a brief acquaintance." "I'm investing in our future, Mr. Rowlands," Xavier corrected him. "Miss Thompson and I are to be married." Rowlands's eyebrows shot up. "Married? Well, that is unexpected," he coughed discreetly. "My condolences on your loss, Miss Thompson. Your parents were fine people, but are you certain this is what you want?" "Perhaps after a suitable period of mourning, my parents would want the ranch to continue," Clara interrupted firmly. "Mr. Young has the resources and knowledge to ensure that happens. Our marriage will secure that future." After the bank business was concluded, they visited the town's minister, arranging for a simple ceremony to be performed the following Sunday. News of their engagement spread quickly through the small town, eliciting raised eyebrows and whispered speculation, but Clara found she cared little for the gossip. Her focus remained on saving her home and honoring her parents' legacy. The wedding was a quiet affair, attended only by Joseph and a few of the townspeople who had been close to Clara's parents. Clara wore her mother's blue dress, and Xavier had purchased a new shirt for the occasion. Their vows were simple and sincere, promising partnership, respect, and fidelity. As they rode back to the ranch, now husband and wife, Clara felt a strange mixture of emotions. Grief for her parents still weighed heavily on her heart, but alongside it was a tentative hope for the future she and Xavier would build together. The first months of their marriage were focused on restoring the ranch to prosperity. They worked from dawn till dusk, mending fences, tending to the horses, and implementing Xavier's ideas for expanding their breeding program. At night, they shared meals and conversation, gradually learning each other's habits, preferences, and histories. Xavier was patient and respectful, never pushing for more intimacy than Clara was ready to give. He slept in a separate bedroom, though sometimes Clara found herself wondering what it would be like to fall asleep in his arms, to wake beside him in the morning light. As summer gave way to autumn, Clara noticed a shift in their relationship. The way Xavier's hand would linger when he helped her down from her horse, the warmth in his eyes when he found her singing to herself while hanging laundry, the way her own pulse quickened when she watched him working with the horses, his strength and gentleness on display. One evening in late September, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Xavier had been quiet throughout the meal, and Clara sensed something weighing on his mind. "Is everything all right?" she asked, breaking the silence between them. Xavier turned to her, his expression earnest. "I've been thinking about us, Clara, about our arrangement." Clara's heart sank. "Are you unhappy here?" "No," Xavier said quickly, reaching for her hand. "Quite the opposite. These past months have been the happiest of my life." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "They have," Xavier nodded, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "I know we agreed to a marriage of convenience, a partnership to save the ranch, but I find myself wanting more. More." Clara echoed, hardly daring to hope she understood his meaning. "I'm falling in love with you, Clara Young," Xavier said simply. "I love your strength, your kindness, your devotion to this land. I love the way you hum when you're lost in thought, the way you talk to the horses as if they can understand every word, the way you've welcomed me into your home and your life." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as emotions she had been holding at bay these past months rushed to the surface. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she whispered. "After my parents died, I thought all joy had left the world, but you brought it back, Xavier. Day by day, moment by moment, you showed me that life still held beauty and promise." Xavier raised a hand to her cheek, gently wiping away a tear with his thumb. "Does that mean?" "I love you too," Clara said, the words releasing something long held tight within her chest. "I think perhaps I've loved you since that night by the river, when you held me and promised me I wasn't alone." Xavier's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. Clara answered by sliding her hands into his hair, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened into something that spoke of longing finally acknowledged. When they broke apart, both breathless, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I want us to be a real husband and wife, Clara, in every way," Clara smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I want that too." That night, Xavier moved his belongings into Clara's bedroom. As they lay together in the darkness, limbs entwined, Clara marveled at how this man, who had been a stranger to her just months ago, now felt like the other half of her soul. "I never thought I'd be grateful for the darkest moment of my life," she murmured against his chest. "But if I hadn't gone to that river that night, we never would have met." Xavier tightened his arms around her. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." As winter settled over Montana, bringing snow to blanket the ranch in pristine white, Clara and Xavier's love continued to deepen. The ranch flourished under their joint care. Their first foals were expected in the spring, and they had begun to make plans for expanding the main house. On Christmas morning, Clara presented Xavier with a hand-knitted scarf and a piece of news that left him speechless with joy. "Truly?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," Clara nodded, covering his hand with her own. "Our family is growing, just like our ranch." Xavier gathered her in his arms, his face buried in her hair. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted," he whispered. "A home, a purpose, a love I never thought possible." "And you," Clara replied, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "You pulled me from the river and showed me that life was still worth living, that even in my darkest hour there was light to be found." As they stood together by the window, watching snow fall gently on the land they both loved, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of despair to the heights of joy, from strangers to lovers to partners in every sense of the word. The river that had nearly claimed her life had instead delivered her into the arms of the man who would become her salvation, her partner, her love. And for that, Clara Young would be forever grateful.